Hi, it's Professor Marsh, and this is the lecture presentation for Unit 8 in Principles of Management, uh, BUA 260A at Newberry College in the fall of 2021. I am Professor Marsh. This is Chapter 8 in the 10th edition of the textbook and Chapter 5 in the 11th. So if you've been following along in the 11th edition, you're going to have to turn back a few chapters to go back to Chapter 5 and to look at the material on change and innovation, managing change and innovation. And in Unit 8, our learning objectives are organizational change, learning about that and the change process, how to manage resistance to change, dealing with employee stress, techniques to stimulate innovation. How do we get people to come up with new ideas? And disruptive innovation. This is new in the 11th edition. I have uploaded a copy of those materials into your course materials for this particular unit. So in Unit 8, you will see a PDF file that has the few pages on disruptive innovation, which is a new section of the book. It's an improvement in the book, and it's it's in there. I will also post in your materials a copy of the interesting module on entrepreneurship that the authors have updated and moved to just after the fifth chapter in the 11th edition. And that's probably the right place to put it. Entrepreneurship is certainly a topic that belongs with change and innovation, as new businesses are typically brought along because someone thinks that they have a new and better idea uh, than what's already out in the marketplace. Excuse me. We're not going to get into the entrepreneurship material right now, but we may come back to it if we have time at the end of the semester. Sorry, I'm having some allergies today. So organizational change and the change process. This is our first topic. Organizational change is any alteration of an organization's people, structure, or technology. And why do organizations need to change? Well, there are both external forces and internal forces, and we'll look at both of those forces. Who initiates organizational change? These are these special people, special agents that we call change agents. And who are change agents and where do they come from? A lot of times you read about people in the media, famous business people, people like Elon Musk or Richard Branson or Steve Jobs, who are considered change agents. And you can have change agents at any level in an organization. They don't have to be the CEO. How does organizational change happen? And we'll look at two metaphors, the calm waters metaphor and the whitewater rapids metaphor. And we'll learn those as far as managing organizational change. Billy Joel may have said, "Don't go changing to try and please me. Uh, I love you just the way you are." And a lot of people are very comfortable in their relationships and in their organizations. Acceptance is comforting. Stability is soothing. Change can be stressful and unsettling. Yet organizations which compete in business need to embrace change or be left behind by their competitors and their customers. External forces that create the need to change can be marketplace and competition factors, government laws and regulations. For example, the ACA, Obamacare, medical insurance changes. Uh, there could be technological changes. Just look at Airbnb uh, and the impact it had on Wyndham Hotels. Wyndham Hotels was an established hotel company, but when Airbnb came along, Wyndham Hotels actually began a business unit designed to manage for property owners, Airbnb units. And so if you go to some of the major resort cities now, and if you can't find a hotel you want to stay in, or perhaps in lieu of finding a hotel you want to stay in, you oftentimes can find a Wyndham office which manages short-term rentals, and you check in at a Wyndham location just like you would be checking into a hotel, and they give you the keys and they give you the passcodes, and you go stay in the house or condo or whatever the unit is that you're renting. So that's how Wyndham adopted to Airbnb. Internal forces, technological change. Southwest Airlines was slow to adapt to digital solutions. That's discussed in your materials. Southwest Airlines has been slow in a lot of areas, and certainly have been in the news lately with respect to their pilots' reluctance to get the COVID vaccine. Um, who's a change agent? Who is a change agent? So anyone can be a change agent. It can be managers or non-managers, or it can be an outside consultant. Uh, with respect to how organizational change happens, note the calm waters metaphor. That is a description of organizational change that likens the change to a large ship making a predictable trip across a calm sea and experiencing an occasional storm. Uh, if you're a huge corporation, if you're Walmart, if you're General Motors, if you're General Electric, you may experience the calm waters metaphor for managing change. It's maybe an occasional project, but it's not really part of your culture. You have mature, established business lines, Coca-Cola, um, companies like that, Procter and Gamble. Uh, so that might be the calm waters metaphor. The whitewater rapids metaphor is a description of organizational change that likens that change to a small raft navigating a raging river. An example in the book was the Nielsen rating service when streaming became popular. So when people stopped watching either broadcast television or cable and started streaming over the internet, uh, that really affected how Nielsen was able to do their work in identifying for the providers of entertainment, what their viewership was, and there was a whole segment of the market that they were missing because of that technological change, and they had to adapt to it, and continuously now have to adapt to it. Certainly, some of the major tech companies, if you look at them, Facebook, Apple, uh, all of the social media companies uh, have a whitewater rapids metaphor because they're trying to change and stay up with and stay ahead of the curve with respect to new apps and new opportunities for them to expand or modify their businesses to increase customer satisfaction and to increase their revenue. Note the name Kurt Lewin and group dynamics. Uh, the importance of group decision making for a buy-in on organizational change. If you're going to make a change in the organization, make sure to include your stakeholders because otherwise you may find some resistance. Let's look at the topic of OD, which is not an overdose. Don't do that. We want organizational development. And organizational development efforts that assist organizational members with a planned change by focusing on their attitudes and values. Organizational development. So, this is a technique or strategy to assess the attitudes, values, and perceptions of your team members. And oftentimes it begins with a survey of the team members, the employees who are going to be affected by changes, or perhaps you want to participate in the change process. And so after the survey and after evaluating that, there'll be some process consultation. some team building exercises. Team building was always fun. A lot of times I've been involved in some team building exercises. One where we went whitewater rafting when I worked for a bank. Another one where we did an organized spelling bee at the Chamber of Commerce with other business organizations competing with us for prizes. Uh, my wife, when she was in consulting, actually went and did some mountain climbing with some guides out west and had a good bit of fun with those sorts of team building activities. Now, in lean times, you probably don't do as much team building. Probably all the training and team building is done on site or in less expensive locations. But in any event, it's fun to get out and to see your coworkers, and particularly people who are at different levels in the organization outside of work, and to get to know them a little bit personally. But as a manager, when you get started, at least assessing the attitudes and beliefs of your members and of your team members, it gives you a head start in crafting your plans for organizational change. Just make sure the participation is perceived to be real and not just window dressing for a decision that has been already made. You can save a lot of negotiating later if you allow many or all of your team members to score some points on the front end, incorporating their ideas, maybe even giving them credit for it, whether you do it expressly or anonymously. Anonymously, you can be in a group and you don't want to identify somebody, but you want them to know that you listen to their thoughts. And you might say, one of you suggested that it isn't enough to text or email clients about their appointments in advance, that we should actually call them and speak with them before they arrive. That would greatly eliminate or greatly reduce late, missed, or canceled appointments. That's a great idea. We've got that in the plan. Uh, Later, when missed appointments drop to zero and late clients are also reduced, you can point to the change and provide a more tangible reward to the employee who contributed, since the organization should have more revenue or lower costs. Managing resistance to change. Why do people resist change? Well, uncertainty, habit. They're in certain habits and they don't want to change. They're comfortable. Concern over personal loss, or they may have a feeling that change is not in the organization's best interest. Your dad never did it that way back when he was running the company. Well, uh, what are some of the techniques that we use to overcome resistance? One might be education and communication, making sure that people understand all the aspects of the proposed change and perhaps overcoming some of those objections in the process. Having them participate, having it, getting some group dynamics going and making sure that people can participate and perhaps tweaking the proposed change when those objections have merit and when people might be able to add their viewpoints and improve the process. Facilitation and support to make sure that there are resources available to the employees who are going to be involved in that organizational change, and that they feel as though they're not out there on their own trying to do something new for the first time that they've never done before, and having having that assistance. Then some other ways might be some negotiation. If you go along with our change, what can we do for you? Uh, Manipulation and co-optation. That's maybe less ethical, and coercion. Just force them to do it, and that's that. Now, I once had a boss who was a very good businessman, had a very clear vision of what he wanted his organization to become. And with a group of lawyers, you had a lot of highly educated people in the organization, and some of them had somewhat different visions for what a law firm should be, such as perhaps a partnership. Uh, I think it's appropriate to point out to you that the last couple of techniques to overcome resistance are a bit hardball. and certainly ethically challenged, if not illegal in some cases. So go down the road of my former boss at your own risk if negotiation and support doesn't work and you have to use manipulation, co-optation, and coercion. Okay, let's go to the topic of employee stress. And this is a big part of the book, and I think it's probably best for you to read it on your own. Certainly, there is student stress in college, and there are resources available at Newberry if you're feeling that stress. Uh, I know that oftentimes people will say, "Well, your college years are the best years of your life." Well, remembering back on my college years, there were certainly some aspects of that that were quite wonderful, but I seemed to be pretty stressed all the time with the school workload and having too much to read all the time. That was certainly true in law school and in the tax program when I went through that at Georgetown. So certainly being an employee and being a responsible employee, you can have stress. It's a response to anxiety over intense demands, constraints, or opportunities. Now, some people work better under stress. Some people kind of float along until it gets to be a crisis, and then they kick in, and they're like Napoleon, at his peak, as a general. I mean, they can organize this. Hey, do this, do that, do this, do that. I know in sports, you see these people who were the great comeback artists. Well, the reason they were having to come back is because they were floating along and they didn't really click in until the game was a crisis, and they had to perform under extremely dire circumstances. Some people are procrastinators, and they need a deadline approaching or perhaps about to pass before they can finally get something done. You see I certainly see students, who turn in their assignments, at 11:54 at night when it's due at 11:55, and sometimes later, people begging for some break on a late submission, and that can be stressful. But some people find it helpful. Once the deadline appears, they do their best work. They can block out everything and just focus on the task at hand. Uh, some people can't handle stress and they become physically or mentally ill. In Japan, the term for death from overwork is karoshi. And I don't know that we have a similar term here, but certainly, we've had people who've had breakdowns because they can't handle the stress. And you see that in the military quite often. I mean, that's a lot of times that's PTSD. You get tired of having the bullets whiz past your head, and being in situations totally out of your control, and you kind of freak out a little. So it can be very unhealthy, and oftentimes you need help. What causes stress? Stressors. There can be task demands and role demands, or conflicts, overloads, and ambiguity, interpersonal demands, harassment, organizational structure, no support, the boss from hell, that sort of thing, maybe the professor from hell. Managing stress. How do you manage stress? Well, you can, as a manager, if you notice that people are stressing out who are working in your area, you can control job related factors and you can offer help for personal stress. And it's a balancing act to offer help. It's nice to have a company or an organization that has a program. So, employee assistance programs and wellness programs uh, are fine, and you can, maybe tactfully mention to the group that if anyone is feeling stress, um, you know, uh, they might want to consult with the employee assistance program or wellness program or talk to the counselor. Um, there's that old movie, Miracle on 34th Street, where when they referred Santa Claus to the industrial psychologist who was there at Macy's department store, it did more harm than good. And I guess was an important part of the movie. He was sort of the villain of the piece, but hopefully you don't have anybody like that guy. in your wellness program or your assistance program. But you don't want to invade into the private lives of your employees. So you could do too much of that if you try to become too involved, and particularly if the employee is not welcome into that sort of assistance. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Horrible Bosses. This is a movie about three friends whose bosses are so awful that they plot to murder all three of them because they just can't take the stress anymore. Uh, that's probably not an appropriate way to manage stress. Quitting is probably healthier. Find another job. If you are a manager seeking to help someone in your group deal with stress, offering that employee assistance program or wellness program is probably the more appropriate way to intervene. At some companies, the wellness program might be linked to providing employee benefits like a gym or nutrition or some sort of a counseling program. So maybe that that would be a helpful way to deflect some of the stress and get people to kind of work it off in the gym or to focus on diet and exercise, that sort of stuff. Okay, techniques to stimulate innovation. How do you create an organization or a business unit that is creative and innovative? Well, teaching innovation. Some people think you can teach innovation. I am a believer in that, and it's a four-step process. There's perception, incubation, inspiration, and innovation. And managing innovation, we look at structural variables to foster innovation, cultural aspects to encourage it, and human resource variables and how that helps innovation. And there's also the idea of design thinking and innovation, where you actually create sort of a design team. And the example that your book gives you is the Intuit company and the development of SnapTax, which was a big product for them. So creativity is the ability to produce novel and useful ideas. And innovation is the process of taking that creative idea and turning it into a useful product, service, or method of operation. Excuse me. It's a little dry in here. Okay, that's better. Structural variables that can encourage innovation can include organic structures, plentiful resources, frequent communication between work units, and things like that. Cultural aspects favoring innovation are cultures that accept ambiguity, tolerate impractical ideas, outliers, weird people, that sort of thing, tolerate risk and conflict, reward innovation, and focus on the ends instead of means or process, and also provide positive feedback and encouragement. Human resource variables that encourage innovation are ones that promote training and development to stay current, offer high job security so there's not an inordinate risk or fear of failure, and encourage members to become idea champions. So, Intuit had a very strong product in TurboTax, and they wanted to encourage design thinking to develop additional products from their growing customer base. They surveyed the customers regarding what pain points they had in working at their home office or at their office with the technological solutions that they had. And the feedback that Intuit got, uh, which they called a pain storm, from their customers, helped them develop a second product and a second revenue stream called SnapTax. So they added SnapTax as a second product to TurboTax, and that gave them over 1 million new customers. Now, new in the 11th edition is this section on disruptive innovation, and it's really good. There are many examples of old products that basically were supplanted by new ideas. Basically, the market changed. The the buggy whip was gone with the horse and buggy, and we now had the Model T, and obviously a lot more modern ones than that. But see the handout, which is in the course work as a reading. The examples of disruptive innovation are legion, and these are some of the greatest products and services ever developed, literally destroying the previous product or service virtually overnight. The stories and case studies about how these new products and services were developed are some of the best instructive manuals for developing a culture of innovation. Where do you find these stories? Well, you could Google the products. Uh, Speaking of Google, remember Yahoo? Speaking of Yahoo, remember encyclopedias? Uh, there's examples all over. You can also find some of these in some of the famous Harvard Business School case studies in the pages of Forbes magazine and the Wall Street Journal that I've previously recommended, uh, and in a number of the good nonfiction business books that are written, including Steve Jobs biographies and things of that nature. I recall in my childhood in New Jersey, we used to take the Garden State Parkway down to my grandmother's house in Metuchen, New Jersey, and we'd go past Menlo Park, where Thomas Edison had lived, the inventor of the light bulb, the phonograph, and hundreds of other inventions. His home is honored with a huge light tower that you can see from the highway, especially at night when it is lit up. Thomas Edison famously said that genius such as his could be taught. He said the formula was 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. In other words, creative geniuses are the ones who work at it, who diligently pursue their ideas for improvements, and don't give up until they figure it out. Thomas Edison's experiment to develop an incandescent light bulb failed over 1,000 times until he found the right fiber to electrify to create that steady light. Well, that's the end of this unit, and we will move on to the next one soon. In the meantime, have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.